cold and blowing snow. It's blowing all over the place out here. The worst is yet to come.
March 13th, 1993, New York City. Over a foot of snow. Winds tearing through Manhattan streets at 70 miles per hour. Record-breaking cold.
A blackout. We don't have any heat, any hot water. We can't cook, and our food's going bad.
Every airport on the East Coast is closed at the same time for the first time in history. Over 300 people lost their lives across multiple states. Nearly 50 sailors lost at sea, and none of it started with snow. Meteorologists had seen a lot of storms, but when they looked at what was building in the Gulf of Mexico, they could only call it one thing: the storm of the century. This is how it unfolded. To understand what happened on March 13th, 1993, you have to go back 5 days. And you have to understand something about how weather works over North America in early spring. March is the cruelest month for weather forecasters in the eastern United States. Winter is not done. Spring has not arrived. The jet stream, essentially a river of fast-moving air high in the atmosphere that dictates where storms go and how strong they get, is still positioned far enough south to tap into cold Arctic air from Canada. But at the same time, the Gulf of Mexico is already warming. The contrast between these two air masses, the bitterly cold air to the north and the warm, humid air to the south, is exactly the fuel that the most violent winter storms run on. And in March of 1993, all of it came together at once. In early March 1993, forecasters at the National Weather Service began to notice something that made them deeply uncomfortable. The computer models, mathematical predictions of the future atmosphere, were showing a pattern developing over the Gulf of Mexico that, if it verified, would be unlike anything the modern East Coast had experienced. The models showed 3 separate weather systems converging simultaneously: an Arctic blast pushing down from Canada, a warm, moist air mass rising from the Gulf, and a powerful trough, a dip in the jet stream, that would act as the engine driving the whole system northward along the eastern seaboard. By March 8th, 5 days before the storm, forecasters were confident enough to begin issuing extraordinary warnings. This was itself historic. Meteorologist Louis Uccellini, who would later become director of the National Weather Service, described the forecasting of this storm as a defining moment, the first time that computer models had reliably predicted a historic, category-level storm far enough in advance for the public to actually prepare. States declared states of emergency before a single snowflake fell. The New York Thruway Authority announced it was closing the Thruway in advance.
It is closed from Rochester to Harriman. That's the New York State Thruway.
Governor Mario Cuomo declared a state of emergency for New York before the snow arrived. The warnings were there, they were accurate, and for once, they were early.
On the evening of Friday, March 12th, 1993, a complex of violent thunderstorms explodes over the northwestern Gulf of Mexico. This is the storm's first act, and it has nothing to do with snow. That comes later. A powerful squall line tears across Florida in the early morning hours of March 13th. Wind gusts exceed 100 miles per hour across the state. 11 tornadoes touch down. A 12-foot storm surge crashes ashore along Florida's west coast in Taylor County alone, sending walls of water through coastal communities before most residents are even awake.
Kids were sleeping, and my husband says, "Get them out of here now." And we couldn't even get out because the wind was blowing so hard we couldn't even get the door open.
All of a sudden, everything just came in, caved in. The walls, both sides fell through, the window fell through.
The coast is already in chaos, but beyond the reach of rescue, in the black waters of the Gulf, the storm is turning deadly. The the 200-foot freighter Fantastico, carrying fertilizer from Miami to Tampa, sinks 70 miles off Fort Myers. A Coast Guard helicopter is dispatched into hurricane-force winds, battling violently shifting air and rapidly dropping fuel levels until it is forced to turn back. Of the 10 men on board, only 3 are saved. The rest are lost at sea. The Coast Guard is already overwhelmed, and the storm has barely started. As the squall line batters Florida, the low-pressure center at the heart of the system is doing something that stops meteorologists cold. It is deepening at a rate almost never seen in a winter storm. In Tallahassee, the barometric pressure drops to 976 millibars, a record for the state. Further north, the pressure drops to 960 millibars, levels normally reserved for major hurricanes. Charlotte, North Carolina records its all-time lowest pressure ever.
Record lows are set across 12 states along the eastern seaboard.
That changes everything, because pressure like that doesn't belong in a winter storm. A pressure gradient that steep means one thing: wind. Not winter wind, hurricane force winds. In the middle of a blizzard. Gusts of 90 miles per hour are recorded at Myrtle Beach. Fire Island, New York records 89 miles per hour. At Mount Washington in New Hampshire, the gusts reach 144 miles per hour. And somewhere in the North Atlantic, 60 miles southeast of Cape Sable Island off Nova Scotia, a 586-foot cargo ship called the Gold Bond Conveyor is fighting for its life. The Gold Bond Conveyor leaves Halifax loaded with gypsum ore, bound for Tampa, Florida. By the time the storm catches her, the waves have built to 50 or 60 feet, 6-story walls of black water. The ship that has survived the infamous perfect storm of 1991, just 2 years earlier, cannot survive this one. The gypsum containers begin to break loose, shifting violently to the right side of the ship. The balance is gone. The hull starts to give. Within minutes, the vessel is tilting 20, 30 degrees more. Then a wave rises out of the darkness. It hits, and just like that, she's gone. 33 crew members were on board. Not one survives. Meanwhile, the snow is just beginning.
By Saturday morning, March 13th,
The full weight of the storm is bearing down on New York. What starts as a blizzard warning is now something forecasters have never quite described before.
A big monster of a coastal storm, the nor'easter, that'll travel up the coast this weekend.
And something that seems to get lost in this, it was cold out there and wind chills were well below zero.
I mean, wind chills were dangerous. I mean, this is the type of wind chill that we don't talk about but maybe 4 or 5 times a year in an average winter. You're talking wind chills that were 30 and 35 degrees below zero.
That's dangerous.
That is dangerous. That's life-threatening.
Snowfall rates of 2 to 3 inches per hour are being recorded across the state. In central New Jersey, the snow is interrupted by 2.5 inches of sleet falling on top of 12 inches of snow, creating what weather observers describe as an ice cream sandwich effect. A dense, compacted layer of ice encased in snow above and below, impossible to shovel, impossible to drive through, and impossible to escape once you're in it. In New York City, more than a foot of snow accumulates over the course of the storm, but the wind is what makes it catastrophic. The same pressure system that drives hurricane-force gusts along the coast sends gales screaming through the corridors of Manhattan. Pedestrians lean into the wind at angles that make forward movement look almost impossible. The subway, normally immune to weather, begins to fail as snow and ice penetrate trackside equipment. The airports, of course, are already closed. To the north, the numbers become almost incomprehensible. In Syracuse, nearly 36 inches of snow fall in a single 24-hour period, an all-time city record that still stands. In Rochester, the temperature drops to -4 degrees Fahrenheit.
In the Catskill Mountains, snowdrifts reach 8 feet. The New York Thruway is closed. The roads are gone. In the Appalachian Mountains further south, over 200 hikers are rescued, people caught on trails and in cabins by a storm that arrives faster and harder than even the forecasters had fully communicated. Along the Long Island coastline, the surf is doing something different. The combination of hurricane-force winds and the storm's enormous pressure gradient drives waves onto the shore with a violence that strips houses from their foundations. At least 18 homes on Long Island fall into the sea. Not flood, not damage, gone. 10 million customers across the eastern seaboard lose electrical power. Every major airport on the East Coast remains closed simultaneously, something that had never happened before in American history and has not happened since. The interstate highway system from Atlanta northward is effectively shut down. The east coast of the United States, for approximately 48 hours, simply stops. The storm kills differently than a tornado or a hurricane, and then the impact becomes personal. There is no single devastating impact, no wall of water, no moment of total destruction. Instead, it accumulates, quietly, persistently, in doorways and driveways and on sidewalks, in the invisible space between cold and exhaustion. That's where most people were lost. Many of the deaths in New York are attributed to cardiac arrest. Men and women shoveling snow in temperatures far below what their bodies can handle, after a night of power outages and no heat, in conditions where emergency services cannot reach them in time. The death toll in New York State alone reaches 15 in the immediate aftermath. Across the broader region, over 300 people lose their lives, 44 of them in Florida, from the tornadoes and storm surge, before the snow even reaches the north. In the cities, the human experience of the storm is one of sudden, total stillness. Local residents who lived through the storm in Queens later recalled that the most frightening thing was not the wind or the snow, but the silence. The city that never sleeps, they said, simply went quiet completely. No traffic, no horns, no subway rumble, just wind and white. In the mountains and rural areas, the isolation is more serious. Families without power face nights at temperatures far below zero, with no way to call for help, and no way for help to reach them. And every hour made it worse. Volunteer fire departments and ambulance crews who try to respond find their vehicles buried, their roads impassable. Some communities remain cut off for 2 and 3 days. The Carrier Dome in Syracuse, the famous indoor stadium at Syracuse University, has to be deliberately deflated to prevent its roof from collapsing under the weight of the snow.
One of the casualties, the Carrier Dome, which was temporarily deflated because of the huge volume of snow. The dome came down in 1984 as a precaution, but that storm was nothing compared to this one.
3 feet of accumulation on an inflatable roof. The engineers make the decision to let it down rather than risk a catastrophic collapse. At sea, the Coast Guard is mounting the largest maritime rescue operation in years. More than 160 people are pulled from stricken vessels in the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico. Most survive. Nearly 50 do not. By late Sunday, March 14th, the storm moves offshore into the North Atlantic. It dissipates over Canada the following day. What it leaves behind is a region that takes weeks to fully process what has happened. The final numbers are staggering. More than 300 confirmed deaths across multiple states. Approximately $5.5 billion in damage. At the time, one of the most expensive winter storms ever recorded, 1993, equivalent to over $11 billion today, making it one of the costliest winter storms in American history. More than 10 million homes and businesses lost power. Hundreds of homes along the Outer Banks of North Carolina are left uninhabitable.
In the world of meteorology, the storm of the century marks a watershed moment that is still discussed today. It was the first time that the National Weather Service's computer models had successfully predicted a catastrophic storm with enough lead time to mobilize states and cities in advance. Uccellini would later call it a defining moment in the ability to predict extreme events, proof that the technology was becoming capable of something forecasters had always hoped for, saving lives by seeing what was coming before it arrived. That forecasting success, ironically, is one of the reasons the death toll was not far higher. The evacuations that happened, the road closures that were ordered, the emergencies that were declared before a single flake fell, all of it worked, imperfectly, but meaningfully, because the warning was accurate and it was believed. The storm of the century was not the last.
It will not be the last. But it remains the benchmark. Because it wasn't just the size of the storm, it was how many different disasters it became at once, and how quickly everything can stop when all of them happen together.
If you made it this far, thank you for being here. These stories take time, care, and a lot of work to bring together, and your support is what keeps them going. If you want to see more documentaries like this, consider subscribing and leaving a like. It genuinely helps more than you realize. And to everyone already supporting the channel, whether you've been here for a while or just found it, thank you. You're the reason these stories continue to be told. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.